In today's lesson, we're going to look at finding the perimeter and area of simple shapes. We're going to add a little bit of a twist to it by looking at how we can use technology such as Excel, where we can kind of do the very basics of coding, you could say, where basically we're entering in a formula and letting the software take over to help us find the perimeter and area of multiple shapes. So if we're looking at our kind of simple shape here, we kind of see our rectangle. Some key things, our length and our width are kind of important terms in terms of understanding what we're referring to. Remember, perimeter is the distance around an object that we can see here in blue, and the area is the amount of space a 2D object takes up, which is basically this entire shaded part. So what we're going to do is we're going to look briefly at a little bit of Excel. So what we have here, we still have our same kind of shape, and in the space below we have a small table where we want to use to find the area and perimeter of different rectangles based on their length and width. So I have my table here. Let me go through and create different widths. So let's say 1 and 4, 2 and 7, 3 and say 9, 5 and 12, and again, it doesn't really matter what you're putting in because we're just kind of looking at how things are changing. Say 6 and 14, 7 and 20. Let's maybe jump it up. We'll do 10 and 50. Let's do 300 and 30. Again, we're just coming up with our own measurements. Let's try 1,010, and we'll do the last one. We'll say 10 and 10. So with this table, or with Excel, I want to be able to create a formula or use my perimeter formula in this kind of table, and then Excel will be able to kind of repeat that formula multiple times. So if we kind of jump back to our image here, when we're trying to find the perimeter of an object, remember perimeter, or P, is equal to, again, the distance around. So you could say your width, plus your length, plus another width, plus another length. That's kind of the basic formula for perimeter of a rectangle. I could shorten this because rather than adding up the width twice, I could say 2 times the width plus 2 times the length is going to equal my perimeter. So 2 different formulas, 2 different ways you can do it. Now, you could go through and manually calculate each perimeter for each shape, but because it might take some time to actually go through and do those calculations, maybe you make a mistake on your calculator, it is kind of helpful to have this kind of tool in your back pocket. So what we're going to do now is in this little cell here, which is what we kind of call the box that we've highlighted, I'm going to start to enter my formula. And in Excel, you can enter any formula you want. Basically, what you're doing is you're telling Excel what calculation I want to do. And the way you can do that is, first, anytime you want to enter a formula, something other than we see, other than writing or a number, you're going to hit equals. And you can either continue to type in the box or the cell here, or you can type up in the, we call the formula spot up here. So again, we know the formula is length plus width plus length plus width, or 2L plus 2W. I'm going to do the short way. So I want to do 2 multiplied, and to do multiply in Excel, it's the little star or shift and 8. And I'm going to multiply that by the length. So rather than type in 1, I'm just going to actually click on the cell, and we can see here it's 2 times the length plus, and I'm going to repeat that 2 times, and now I want it multiplied by the width, if it will let me click it. and we can see here 2 times the width. It's a little bit hard because of the cells, but you can also move things over or make things larger. As long as you're clicking on the right boxes, we can see 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Once that's done, I'm going to hit enter, and we can see that it's auto-populated the formula, or used that same formula for the entire set of triangles we have. So we found the perimeter for all 10 triangles just by entering one formula. Now, that's a bit specific to this table here, but again, as long as you create this formula, and you can also and enter, it'll give you your answer. In some cases, you could also drag down the box, that little green thing, and that will copy out the formula to every single one. So you can see we have our perimeter here. Let's do the same thing with area. Make our boxes a little bit bigger so we can get rid of that overlap. So for area, if we go back to our little diagram, area, or A, is equal to length times width, or you can just say LW, whichever version you prefer. So we have length times width. There's no other way to shorten that, so this is going to be a little bit easier. So I'm going to go back to Excel. In my spot for area, I'm going to start to enter a formula. I'm going to do equals, and I'm going to click on the length, and then Shift 8 to multiply by the width. So I can see length times width, hit enter, and there we have the area for all 10 of our rectangles. And all we had to do was enter one number, or one formula. Now it is dependent that we get the formula correct, but again, you can see that by just entering the formula, doing very basic coding, you could say, we're able to generate the measurements for all 10 triangles. If we had a larger set, we would have more of them, or it would do all of them at the same time. So just looking through here, explain what happens to the perimeter of the rectangle as you make its length and width larger or smaller. Well, we can see that as the length and the width get larger, our perimeter gets larger. Right? When our length and our width get smaller, our perimeter gets smaller. And same thing, explain what happens to the area of a rectangle if you make its length and width larger or smaller. Again, we can see that when the length and width increase, our area increases as well. And when it gets smaller, our area gets smaller. Now the nice thing about this is, if I want to get rid of all of these measurements, it keeps the formulas there. So let's say I want to go back and I want to do different sizes. So let's say 6 and 5. I have my perimeter and area for a rectangle of that with those measurements. Let's say 34 and 57. I now have the perimeter and area for those rectangles. And again, you can go through and come up with different measurements if you want. And you can do the same thing with different shapes, provided you have the correct perimeter and area formulas, and you've set up a table correctly, which we'll talk about later. But as long as you're comfortable entering in these formulas in the formula bar, or just kind of getting a brief understanding of how to do that. Because again, it's very useful when you have lots of calculations to go through and do.